My name is Aletta, and the day we buried my wife, Mara, the world felt like it had been drained of all color. The sky was gray, not just above me, but inside me. Even the flowers, those overpriced arrangements people send out of obligation, seemed ashamed to bloom. Everything felt too loud and too quiet at once. Clinking silverware at the reception, whispers I didn't want to hear, and the gaping silence where her voice used to be. I couldn't look at the casket too long. Every time I did, a memory ambushed me. The first time I saw her smile, the way she used to hum when cooking rice, how she'd tuck notes into my coat pocket for no reason other than to remind me I mattered. Grief is cruel like that. It doesn't just replay the big moments. It torments you with the small ones you took for granted. People came in waves, some sincere, others with that strained sympathy tone that says, "I have a casserole, and that's all the comfort I know how to offer." I nodded. I thanked. I hugged. But I was somewhere else entirely. Then I saw Adam, our son, standing a few feet away, in a sharp black suit that probably cost more than Mara's entire wardrobe. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even blinking too much. He was on his phone, at my wife's funeral. I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he nudged his wife and whispered something. She laughed. I don't know why that tiny moment pierced me, but it did. Maybe because it wasn't just that he wasn't grieving. It was that he seemed inconvenienced. Like this day was just another appointment on his calendar he couldn't reschedule. When I finally approached him, he gave me a quick hug, stiff and brisk, like handing off a business card. "Dad, after this, we should talk about practical stuff," he said under his breath. "You need help with bills, the property, insurance forms. You know, logistics." Logistics. That was the word he used while his mother's body lay 15 feet from us. I nodded, mostly to keep myself from shattering, but inside something shifted. Mara had worried about this side of him. She said it once, in the kitchen, coffee in hand. "I don't think Adam sees people the way we do." I'd defended him back then. Told her he was just ambitious, busy. But as I watched him scroll through his emails at her wake, I wondered if maybe she'd been right all along. I sat in the back corner once the formalities finished, away from the noise and the noise inside the noise. People talking about the weather, sales, stocks. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. At that moment, I was just numb. Grief is supposed to pull families together. Instead, it felt like the first crack in something I didn't realize was already breaking. A week. That's how long it took before Adam stopped pretending to grieve. I was still waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for a body that wasn't there. Her side of the bed remained untouched, the pillow still holding the shape of her head like even time was reluctant to let her go. I hadn't cleared her closet. Hadn't touched her tea mugs. I couldn't. But somehow Adam had already moved on to spreadsheets. He called around dinner time. A quick, clipped tone I've learned to expect from him since he started climbing the corporate ladder. "Hey, Dad, I figured I'd swing by tomorrow to talk through some things. Practical stuff, okay? Just estate things." I knew what he meant. But hearing him say it like we were settling the leftovers after a family barbecue boiled something inside me I couldn't quite name. He showed up right on time the next day, holding a manila folder, and dressed like he was stepping into a board meeting. He didn't even glance at Mara's garden as he walked by. Didn't ask if I'd eaten. Didn't offer a hug. Just walked in like this house belonged to him too. Like Mara's touch on every wall, every photo frame. Every spice jar was an inconvenience. He spread the folder out on the kitchen table. "I did a little digging," he started, tapping a spreadsheet. "The property is worth quite a bit now, especially in this market. Possibly 7 figures with the right buyer." I didn't say anything. I just looked at the kitchen counter where Mara's apron still hung like she'd be back any minute. "I think," he continued, "it makes sense that we sell, split the assets, move you into something more manageable. You know, less maintenance, lower taxes, maybe assisted living if you're comfortable with that." That was when I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I needed to release something before it turned into something uglier. He didn't blink. "This house," I said slowly, "was never about asset value. Your mother planted every shrub out front. She sanded every cabinet in that pantry herself. We didn't build value here. We built a life." He looked at me like I'd started speaking another language. I know. But it's not just about sentiment, Dad. It's about equity. I mean, it's not fair if it all just stays under your name. Legally, it's part of the estate. It affects me too. Us. Us. That word sat like a stone in my stomach. Us. The sudden inclusion of himself into something he didn't invest in. He hadn't lifted a hammer during renovations, hadn't made a mortgage payment, hadn't been here for Mara's chemo appointments near the end. But now everything was ours. I asked quietly, "Did your mother seem like the kind of woman who would want her home, this home, flipped for market appeal a week after she passed?" He sighed and smiled like he was the adult and I was just being emotionally difficult. "I'm not trying to upset you. I'm trying to optimize a tough situation." He said optimize like we were rearranging office furniture, like her life, her memory, our marriage. It was just inefficient overhead on a balance sheet. He stayed for half an hour more, walking the house and mumbling things like great bones and modernize the kitchen. I didn't follow him. I just sat there, listening to his footsteps echo where her laughter used to live. After he left, I stood in the center of the hallway and looked around. Every photo, every chipped tile she refused to replace because it had personality, now felt on the chopping block. I wondered if Adam saw me in the same way, inefficient, outdated, in the way. Something to be processed. I didn't cry right then. I didn't scream. I just sank to the floor and pressed my back against her closet door. I thought losing Mara would be the hardest part of this year. I was wrong. The rain had come in lazy sheets that night, not violent, just steady, rhythmic, like the world was mourning with me. I hadn't turned on the TV or the lights. I sat alone in the living room, Mara's Afghan wrapped around my shoulders. Nursing a cup of cold tea I had no interest in finishing. Grief has a way of pulling quiet things to the surface. That's when I noticed the little wooden box on the mantel. Mara's keepsake box. It was the only item in the house our son never touched. Maybe because he always said it looked too sentimental. Inside were old movie stubs, pressed flowers, and notes she'd written to herself over the years. I always thought of it as her private memory garden, and I never rifled through it. But something tugged at me that night. Beneath an old birthday card and a faded photo of us in Venice, I found an envelope. My name was on it, just a letter, in that gentle, slightly slanted handwriting she used when she wrote grocery lists or the little tags on Christmas presents. I hadn't seen it until now. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe she knew I'd find it exactly when I needed to. Hands shaking, I opened it. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope you waited. I hope you gave yourself time. If you're still too broken, put this away and come back later. But if you're ready, I need to tell you something important. By the time I hit that second paragraph, my breath had caught in my chest. There's something I never told you. Not because I doubted you, but because I was trying to protect you from what I saw happening. I deeded the second house, the West Pine property, to your name only. It's yours, Aletta. Fully do not speak of it. Not yet, not until you know. Watch how he treats you when he thinks I've left you with nothing. Let him show you who he is first. Then decide what you'd like to do. I sat there, frozen. The second house. She was talking about the bungalow in West Pine. The one we quietly bought years ago when property values were low, and she had said, offhandedly, think of it as insurance, love. I thought she meant financial security. I didn't realize she meant emotional armor. It had stayed rented out all these years through a management company she insisted handle everything. I'd asked once or twice about its status, and she always patted my hand and said, handled, darling. Just worry about the roses in the backyard. I had no idea she'd put it solely under my name. I reread her final words twice, then 3 more times. Watch how he treats you when he thinks I left you with nothing. What a thing to write. What a thing to know. I collapsed into the armchair, letter still in hand, as the fullness of her insight washed over me. She hadn't just known she was leaving, she had prepared for what would come after. All those small moments, the times she'd pause when Adam made cutting comments, the glare she gave him when he rolled his eyes at me. She noticed things. She didn't forget them. She didn't excuse them the way I had, no. Mara had been watching long before I was willing to open my eyes. And now, even in death, she was still protecting me. I folded the letter carefully, like it was holy parchment, and placed it back in the box. I didn't need to respond. She already knew what I would do. From that night on, everything Adam said, did, or suggested would be viewed with clarity and distance. He had no idea I had another home. No idea his mother had outplayed him years ago. Not out of spite, but out of love. After that night with Mara's letter, something in me quietly shifted. I didn't say anything to Adam. Not yet. But I started listening with a different kind of ear. Really hearing what he said, and how he said it. Once you take off the blinders love puts on, it's shocking how clearly the tone underneath the words reveals itself. The next time Adam came by, he let himself in without knocking. He used to call first. Now he just assumed the house was open to him. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up like he had important plans right after his visit. He glanced around, frowning at the dust particles catching the light in the living room. This place is holding up, he said, but I can see it might be getting a bit much, huh? I raised an eyebrow. A bit much? I mean for you. The garden's overgrown, some of the siding is weathered. He trailed off, pacing through the hall as if he owned it. I just worry. It's a big responsibility and, well, you're not young anymore, Dad. There it was. Subtle, but clear. I'd gone from father to fragile inconvenience. That garden, I said, keeping my voice steady, was your mother's first therapy after her diagnosis. Those daisies survived 2 hailstorms. I think I'll manage. He gave one of those polite chuckles people use to move on from things they don't care about. Right, of course. Strong flowers. Still, maybe it's something to think about. Downsizing. There's a brand new senior living complex near the lake. Modern amenities, 24/7 staff. You'd have companionship, less to manage. And the sooner we list this house, the more we'd make on it. We again. There it was, creeping back in. It wasn't just the financial push that unsettled me. It was the way he'd started parroting concern like a disguise for control. Every suggestion was framed as care, but the subtext was always, let me take it from here. A few nights later, he stayed for dinner. I made Mara's shepherd's pie, and I could already tell he was trying to resist wrinkling his nose. He used to love this meal as a boy. Now he pushed carrots around his plate like tasting it might chip away at his sophisticated persona. You know, Dad, he said halfway through chewing. You could get one of those meal subscription plans. I looked into them. It'd save you time. Nutrition counts more at your age. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, the way he didn't touch the casserole dish Mara had gifted us on our 30th anniversary. The way he hadn't asked once how I was doing, just how he could sort me out. He looked up when I didn't respond. Just a suggestion, he added, smiling that self-congratulatory smile people have when they think they're being thoughtful. I can still cook. I said it softly. But the tone must have caught him off guard. He blinked. Of course you can. I'm not saying you can't, he rushed. I just mean, why make life harder than it needs to be? For who, I wanted to ask. For me or for you? Every visit had a new version of the same conversation. He'd bring budgets or brochures. One day it was estate planning, the next taxes, the next liquidation strategies. I just listened, letting him dig his own hole. He started speaking about my things like they were already floating in limbo. You probably won't need all the garage tools. I could take those off your hands now. Or, if the antique dresser doesn't fit in the new space, I know someone who'd pay for vintage pieces. The dresser he was referring to wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was the first thing Mara and I ever bought together at a secondhand shop. We carried it 8 blocks home in the rain because neither of us could afford the delivery fee. The water had stained the back corner, but she loved how that made it ours. I asked him once, "Do you even like this house?" He shrugged. "It's a house, Dad, nothing personal. It's just too much for where you are in life. It makes sense to plan ahead." Plan ahead. Every subtle jab was a reminder that to him, I was becoming surplus. A logistical inconvenience doddering through the final stages of life. hopefully with enough lucidity to sign a dotted line before fading into a facility. But what struck me hardest wasn't the disrespect. It was the absence of grief. No sadness about his mother. No mention of her laugh, her voice, her scent in the linens. She was gone 7 days, and he'd already placed her spirit in his spreadsheets. Cleared column, that was when I stopped, calling this a phase. This wasn't a son in mourning. This was a man revealing who he'd always been, and who I refused to see. It was 5 years ago, maybe 6. The day Mara first showed me the second house, the one tucked away on West Pine. It was so nondescript, it nearly disappeared behind a curtain of overgrown trees. Just a small beige bungalow with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. Nothing flashy. Exactly the kind of place you'd pass without a second thought. She had that look on her face, though. The mischievous glint that usually meant she'd taken on another impulsive project, like the time she bought a dehydrator and filled our kitchen with drying herbs for 3 weeks straight. "We're buying it," she said casually, adjusting her sunglasses. "Not together, just you." "In your name only," I blinked. At the time, I didn't understand. We were always partners. Bank accounts, bills, taxes. There was never a mine or yours between us. "Only ours. Why would we do that?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Just walked up the creaky porch steps, pulled out a tarnished key, and pushed the door open. The inside smelled like old books and stale air, but somewhere in there was potential. Hardwood under thick rugs, arched doorways, charm that needed just a little love. She turned toward me and said quietly, "People only show you love when they need something from you. I want you to have something they can't take." It was the kind of sentence that hung in the air long after the echo of her voice faded. She wasn't accusing anyone by name, but we both knew she didn't need to. She'd seen the small slights at family dinners. The way certain relatives looked past me when they asked about real accomplishments. The way Adam rolled his eyes when I offered to fix something instead of calling a professional. Quiet judgments, accumulating in corners of family gatherings like dust. Even back then, I think she saw what I wouldn't admit, that our son was becoming more calculating than kind. "I don't want to be morbid," she added, brushing cobwebs off a windowsill. "But when I'm gone, I doubt many will rush forward to protect you. I've watched how fast people can change when a will gets involved. Paper brings out the greed in people who don't even realize they're greedy." We bought the house in cash 6 weeks later. She handled the paperwork. I remember her sliding over the deed with my name, not hers, and adding, "We won't tell anyone. Not until you need it." At the time, I smiled, kissed her forehead, and told her she was overthinking things. "Drama like that," I said, "only happened in movies. My family wouldn't act like that." But she didn't argue. She just gave me that knowing half smile and folded the papers into a manila envelope. Now, sitting here just days after her funeral, watching Adam circle the house like a hawk, I know exactly why she did what she did. She wasn't paranoid. She was prepared. And she was right. It was a Friday evening when Adam invited himself over again, this time under the pretense of checking in. I should have known better when he suggested we have dinner together, like old times. There hadn't been an old time in years with him that didn't involve a veiled suggestion or a hidden agenda, but Mara had taught me to listen fully before assuming the worst. I made her favorite baked ziti. It felt like keeping a piece of her in the room. For a moment, as the oven warmed and the scent of garlic filled the kitchen, I could almost pretend things were normal. But when the doorbell rang, I opened it and found Adam, standing next to a woman with a clipboard and stilettos that clicked sharply across the porch. "This is Brianna," he said far too cheerfully. "She's a real estate consultant. Just wanted her to take a quick look at the layout while we're here. Nothing formal, just exploration." He didn't even pause to ask. I stepped aside, not because I agreed, but because I was too stunned to form words. She smiled politely, all business, and immediately started assessing the home like she was sizing up a property she already owned. Notes, photos, murmured square footage estimates echoed behind me as I walked back toward the table. My pulse ticking, Adam followed casually, like nothing was off. "I figured it would be efficient," he said, pulling out a chair. "You're always saying dinner feels too quiet, so why not spice it up with a little future planning?" I didn't respond. The ziti sat steaming in its dish. suddenly looking like a prop. We began eating, or rather, I picked at my food while he launched into what clearly had been rehearsed. "I've been talking with a few financial advisors," he began, dabbing his mouth with a napkin he hadn't used in years. "And the market's in an upswing. Mom would have wanted us to be smart with the assets she left behind." He said us again, like her death was a business transaction. "You're living in a 2,500-square-foot house alone, Dad," he continued, almost too calmly. "You don't need this much space. Maintenance, utilities, lawn care, it's all excess. It's wasteful. I'm not trying to be pushy, but it's time we simplify things." I looked down at my plate. Mara's seat was still across from mine, empty. I cleared my throat. "And by simplify, you mean?" He straightened in his seat like a lawyer rising in court. "Sell the house. Downsize. I have some senior housing brochures in the car. Really high-end places. And I also spoke with our family lawyer. Technically, the house being part of the marital estate means I'm a legal heir. Just food for thought." Then he laughed, like this was all very reasonable. "Besides," he added, spearing a piece of pasta, "you don't need all this space anyway. That's what did it. Not the legality threat. Not the brochures, that sentence. You don't need all this space. As if this home was just square footage. As if it hadn't held birthdays, anniversaries, Tuesday naps, 10,000 ordinary little mornings Mara and I had lived and loved inside. As if it were just a number on a Zillow page, not a life." I looked up at him and said, almost softly, "Not everything of value is meant to be sold, Adam." He leaned back, his smile faltering. "Are you refusing to sign, Dad?" he asked, tone sharpening. I locked eyes with him, feeling that edge of silence Mara once called my calm threat. "I'm saying this house isn't in play. Not now, not with those reasons, and certainly not in front of a stranger while we're eating dinner." Brianna looked up, suddenly unsure of her place. He looked annoyed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I said, standing. "You are. You came into your mother's home with someone she never met, during a meal she used to love, to pitch me on selling the life we built, like this was a timeshare presentation. You're not helping. You're dismantling." For a long second, he said nothing. Then he stood and gathered his coat, forcing a smile that didn't quite fit. "Well," he muttered, "think about it. Markets shift fast. I didn't walk them out." I sat there in the quiet as the front door closed, the long hallway echoing behind them. But for the first time in weeks, my hands felt still. I wasn't angry. I was clear. It started small, like everything does. First, my sister stopped answering my phone calls. Then I noticed fewer texts from Mara's nieces and nephews. No invitations, no check-ins. Just a quiet pulling away. Like I had grown too heavy to carry or too strange to include. I brushed it off at first. Grief makes everything blur. I figured maybe they just didn't know what to say. But then I overheard something at the grocery store. Susan, Mara's cousin, was chatting far too loudly in the next aisle, with a friend of Adam's no less, and her words cracked the air wide open. "Poor Aletta. I heard he's not handling things well," she said in a hushed voice that pretended to be caring. "Adam mentioned he's getting confused a lot lately. Might be time for a proper evaluation, you know? Confused?" I stood there frozen, my hands wrapped around a jar of marinara, unsure whether to break it or drop it. When I got home, the isolation I hadn't wanted to see finally sat beside me like an unwanted guest. No one had visited in over 3 weeks. My neighbor Tom, who used to stop by on Sundays to sit on the porch with me, suddenly had too many errands. Even Patsy from church hadn't responded when I offered to drive her to the Thursday luncheon. Adam was painting a picture of me as unstable, and people were buying it. I confronted him about it 2 days later. He didn't deny it. "I'm not trying to insult you," he said calmly, like he was asking me to consider switching toothpaste. "I'm trying to protect you. You're forgetting things, Dad. You called me your brother's name last week. Remember that?" "That wasn't confusion," I replied coldly. "It was exhaustion and stress. Something you may not understand under those $1,000 suits." He brushed past that. "People are worried. Legally, things can get complicated if something happens to you. Power of attorney isn't a punishment. It gives me the ability to protect your wishes." "My wishes?" as if he'd honored a single one of them since Mara died. He offered the documents casually, like handing a menu across a table. I didn't even look at them. I pushed them back toward him. No, he didn't argue, just nodded, folded the forms and said, "If things get worse, I'll revisit." If. It wasn't a statement of concern. It was a threat cloaked in care. After that visit, the silence got louder. People didn't respond to my calls because somewhere along the grapevine Adam had planted things like, "He's not doing well. He's confused. He refuses help. He might be a danger to himself." And the thing about family is, once a story catches, people don't ask questions. They just shift their weight quietly onto the other foot and start to fade. I found myself eating alone, week after week, the phone lying still on the charger, like even it had stopped believing in connection. Wasn't losing my mind. I was watching my son isolate me on purpose. And I couldn't help but wonder, how long had he planned this? I waited until the weather turned warm, one of those sunny, deceptive spring mornings that pretends the world has no shadows, to schedule the meeting. I didn't call Adam. I didn't tell a soul. I simply got dressed, tucked Mara's old letter into my coat pocket like a charm, and made my way to our family lawyer's office, just as we had done 20 years earlier when we bought this house. Mr. Duval hadn't aged much, at least not in the way most men do. His hair had simply given up and gone white all at once, but his eyes, sharp and knowing, were exactly the same. He greeted me with warmth, held my hand a little longer than I expected, then walked me into a quiet back room. There were no other clients that hour, just me, him, a stack of folders, and time I was finally ready to use. "I was wondering if I'd hear from you," he said. "Especially after the news. The funeral?" I asked. "No, the rumors." I didn't have to ask what he meant. Word travels fast in families. Faster still when the whispers are dipped in concern and doubled in entitlement. I haven't lost my mind. I said it plainly, like telling someone I hadn't misplaced my wallet. He gave me a long, patient look. "I never thought you had." I pulled out Mara's letter and slid it across the glossy oak table. He read it slowly, nodding to himself, lips pressed tight. "She thought ahead," he said. "She always did," I replied. For the next 2 hours, we went through everything. The revised will, the deed to the second property, which was still fully in my name, the power of attorney that wasn't going to Adam, not now, not ever, and a living trust outlining where I wanted things to go, all in clear, irrevocable terms. "No confusion," I said, drawing a line under my signature. "No loopholes. No gray areas for anyone to drag their feet through later." Duval smiled at that. "It's a clean setup, Aletta. He can rant, he can posture, but legally, your wishes will be honored to the letter. Even if he contests it, it's solid." I exhaled, slowly, for what felt like the first time in weeks. Somewhere between the rage, the isolation, and the heartbreak, I had been carrying around a tension so tight I'd forgotten it wasn't permanent. The relief didn't settle on me all at once. It crept under my skin like warmth returning to frostbitten fingers. Duval leaned back in his chair, folding his fingers thoughtfully. "You know," he said, after a pause, "you don't need to fight this out loud, Aletta." I looked up. He continued, "Men like your son, people who are used to controlling rooms, they expect resistance, drama, pushback. But silence? Silence unnerves them." I had to smile at that, the corner of my mouth lifting in a way it hadn't since before the funeral. He went on, voice low and certain. "You don't need to argue. Just let him think he won. Let him poke and prod and dance around his own reflection. Let him believe the vacuum means you've gone quiet out of defeat, not strategy." The image was almost funny. Adam smug in his assumptions, circling a house he thought belonged to empty air and fading memory, never realizing. The floor beneath him had been pulled. I left the office with new folders in my hand and a stronger spine than I walked in with. The second house still stood quietly under my name. My will was clear, and for the first time since Mara died, so was I. I'd always known there would come a day when I'd stop calling this house home. I just didn't think it would be my choice, let alone part of a plan. But life has a way of shifting when you finally stop clinging to what used to be and start listening to what's always been true in your gut. and my gut told me it was time to leave. What I didn't tell Adam was that I was leaving on my own terms. It started with a pause at the breakfast table. I let my eyes drift like I was overwhelmed, tired even. Then, after a long sigh that wasn't entirely fake, I said, "Maybe you're right." Adam blinked, halfway through scrolling an article on his phone. "Right, about what?" "About the house," I said carefully, voice soft like surrender. "Maybe it is too much for me. All this upkeep, the empty space, your mother's things. I think I'm ready to move on." You'd have thought he'd won the lottery. He sat up straight, that eager, businesslike mask barely hiding the excitement behind his eyes. "That's good, Dad, really good. I think it'll be healthier for you, emotionally and financially. Healthier for me," I thought. Is that what greed calls itself now? That weekend, he came by early with a contractor in tow and started rattling off potential upgrades. Paint colors, flooring materials, resale strategies. He talked about tearing out the garden, installing recessed lighting, modernizing the kitchen Mara had grouted with her own hands. I stood in the background, pretending not to flinch. "Think we could have it listed by spring," he said to the contractor. "If we act fast, we'll catch the pre-summer buyers." We. There it was again, the colonizers' we. The next morning, I packed a single overnight bag. Just enough clothing for a few days. No boxes, no dramatic goodbyes. I made sure Adam saw me from his car in the driveway, struggling slightly with the bag, as if I was off to check into some assisted living home. He lowered the window, looking surprised. "You're heading out?" I gave a tight smile. "Thought I'd try a place out." He nodded approvingly. "Smart move. Want me to swing by this weekend? Help with storage or whatever?" "That won't be necessary." He didn't ask anything else. Didn't ask where. Didn't ask who or why or even if I was okay. Just waved like he was watching luggage slide down an airport carousel. I drove past the city limits, past the condos he thought would have suited me better, past the senior homes he'd circled on his printouts, and then down that winding road lined with tall pine trees, where the sunlight darted between branches like a secret trying to stay hidden. The West Pine house stood waiting for me, silent and undisturbed. She always did like quiet places. The key still worked. The smell inside had barely changed since Mara last lit one of those clove candles she loved. I set my bag down in the hallway, took a deep breath, and opened the curtains. Light poured in. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't optimized living or market ready, but it was mine. And Adam? He had no idea. As far as he knew, I'd faded into the background of his brilliant little plan, signing away the past, settling into the shadows. But I hadn't moved out to give in. I'd moved to step out of his reach. The morning of the open house, the sky was unusually clear, as if the universe itself had decided to watch. I hadn't planned to come back. After all, I was already gone in every way that mattered. My toothbrush sat in a different bathroom. My coffee mug was no longer in the cabinet he'd once emptied without asking. But there was one item I hadn't taken with me when I moved. A weathered wooden picture frame that held one of Mara's old handwritten letters. Her words etched in dainty, faded ink behind cracked glass. It had hung for years just above the entryway mirror. I hadn't been ready to look at it before. Now it felt like it belonged with me. Not in a home-turned showroom for strangers. Adam had texted me about the open house in his usual efficient tone. "I'll be handling everything." "You don't need to be there. I have paperwork covered." Thanks. As if I were a guest who's overstayed in my own life. I pulled up a little after noon. The driveway was full. 3 cars in front, one parked crooked on the edge of the lawn. Balloons fluttered on the mailbox, and a small sandwich board sign planted in the grass read, "Open House." 4-bed, 3-bath, prime lot felt surreal, like walking into the set of someone else's life. People milled around the front porch, chatting and sipping flavored water from plastic cups. I could already hear voices drifting in from inside. "Oh, the lighting in here is amazing!" And this would be perfect for entertaining. I held the door open quietly, slipping through the crowd. The scent of antiseptic air freshener clung to the walls, masking the smells of rosemary and lemon that used to trail behind Mara as she cooked. The kitchen had jars of fake fruit lined on top of the cabinets, placed like props, erasing anything real, and in the middle of it all stood Adam. He wore that politician smile. Nice suit, sleeves rolled just enough to look relatable, clipboard in one hand and a drink in the other. He looked proud, confident, like a man who thought he'd finally executed a perfect plan. Dad? He looked surprised when he saw me, slightly annoyed. Didn't expect you today. Just here for my frame, I replied, nodding toward the foyer. Oh, sure. He turned to one of the buyers. Excuse me a sec. I reached for the frame and gently removed it from the wall while he hovered a few steps back. It's a great turnout, he said, hands in his pockets. House is basically selling itself. It was quiet for a beat before I said, You get the title search done? He blinked. Of course. Everything's ready, Dad. Honestly, you should have let me handle this from the beginning. It's been smoother than I expected. I nodded. I'm sure it has. A young couple near the hallway called out, Hey, do you have any information on the title specifics? Our agent wanted a breakdown for the offer. Adam brightened. Yeah, of course. I emailed all the disclosures and deed references. It's technically still in my father's name, but I have durable POA, so it's perfunctory, really. Shouldn't be a hold-up. They smiled politely but gestured toward their realtor, who had just arrived. She was already pulling out a file. I actually ran the pre-title request this morning, she said with a tight smile. Just for formality. But, I'm sorry, there's an issue. Adam's smile froze. Her tone shifted slightly, like she was trying to be gentle but firm. There's no record of title transfer or shared ownership. It shows the house is still entirely and legally owned by Aletta. No liens, no split deed. No active power of attorney on file recognized by the state. Silence spread through the room like spilled paint. Adam looked at me, panic flickering behind certainty. That can't be right. My lawyer would have had to file, and recorded filings always show. She interjected. And there's nothing here. I even reran it 2 minutes ago to double-check. He's the sole owner. That's final. This house can't legally be sold without his signed authorization. All eyes turned to me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply said, calm and clean. Then there's really nothing more to discuss. The couple awkwardly excused themselves and shuffled toward the door. A mother with her toddler gave Adam a tight-lipped smile as she followed. One by one, the room drained itself. Chatter turned to whispers. Excitement to confusion, Adam turned to me, jaw tight. You knew. This whole time? You knew and you didn't say anything. I met his eyes. Exactly. He stepped forward, voice low. You embarrassed me. No, I said, stepping past him without rush. You embarrassed yourself. I just let you talk long enough to do it. He stood in that hallway, our hallway, like a man trying to grab a shadow. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have a comeback. He had no contract, no ownership, no control, just assumptions. And that smile? Gone. I stepped outside with the frame in my hands, the echo of the front door closing behind me more satisfying than I expected. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't needed to fight to do it. By the time I reached my car, the open house had fully collapsed into something closer to a spectacle. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands resting on the framed letter across my lap, but the voices from the porch filtered out clear as glass, the kind of disappointed murmurs no amount of charisma can cover up. This is a waste of time. Can you believe he didn't even check the title? Total amateur move. The front yard was now dotted with irritated couples, awkwardly sipping the last of their lemon water, talking just loud enough for Adam to hear. The real estate agent, Brianna, was pacing on her phone by the mailbox, voice sharp as a blade. I could see the way her free hand flailed in the air, pointing at documents, gesturing with frustration. Probably to her boss, or her lawyer. Adam stood in the entryway, alone. Clipboard gone, smile wiped. No confident posture this time, just someone caught in their own lie with no script left to perform. I stayed parked for a while. For Mara, for me, to witness the full unraveling, not out of cruelty, but for confirmation. the kind that only comes when masks fall in public daylight. That's when my sister Elise arrived. She stepped out of her car in a hurry, pulling her cardigan tighter across her chest. The moment she spotted Adam, she beelined for him, looking nervous. They talked in hushed tones, too quiet to hear from where I sat, but I could guess. She looked blindsided, anxious, scanning the house like trying to solve a puzzle she didn't know she'd been handed upside down. Adam kept shaking his head, fists clenched, lips moving too fast. Finally, I stepped out of the car. As I approached the porch, Elise turned to look at me. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, then closed again. "I got a call," she said eventually, softly. "From Susan. Said the house wasn't yours to sell?" "Correct," I said. "So why did Adam—" She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't fill it in for her. Behind us, a few buyers lingered, walking off slowly into their cars with passive glances our direction. I heard someone near the fence mutter, "This is why you don't skip title checks," followed by a dry laugh. Adam couldn't take it anymore. "Why are you all acting like this is some big gotcha?" "So what? Fine, I assumed wrong. We can still move forward once everything's transferred." I tilted my head. "Transferred how?" He squinted at me like I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. "Dad, come on. Be reasonable. You don't need to live alone. You don't need this. It's not about punishing me." "I know," I said. "It's about protecting what's left of your mother's wishes, which I see now never included you having your way." His cheeks flushed. "So now we're playing hero? The victim who set a trap?" I didn't reply. That's the thing about power. It doesn't yell. Elise touched my arm. "You knew, didn't you?" "The whole time. I did," I said calmly. That was when Aunt Margie, who had apparently been sitting on the porch swing unnoticed, piped up just loud enough for both Adam and the others still listening to hear. "Looks like your dad's not so helpless after all." Adam's jaw tensed. For a split second I saw behind his expression, to fear, maybe shame, maybe even recognition. But it passed. He shoved his hands into his pockets and walked inside without another word. Elise stared after him, silent. Then she turned back to me. "What are you going to do with the house?" she asked. I looked up at the windows, at the roof Mara always fretted over during rainstorms, the flower bed that refused to grow anything but marigolds. "Nothing," I said. It did its part. Then I nodded goodbye to Elise, stepped back into my car, and let that last murmur from the porch wrap around me like a quiet apology the family never said aloud. Not so helpless after all. The porch of the West Pine house creaks in the quietest, most comforting way, as if it sighs with me. There's a slowness out here that I didn't know I needed. Cicadas hum in the distance. The air smells like pine and turned soil. This place doesn't whisper of Mara. It holds her. Softly. Completely. Like a home that knew her better than most people ever did. I sit in the same old wooden chair we placed here years ago, the one she made me promise not to replace, even when the paint began to chip. "Things with character shouldn't be repainted," she'd said. "They've earned their edges." It's only now, looking out from this porch, that I can fully understand the gift she gave when she put this house in my name. It wasn't revenge against Adam. It was protection. It was preservation. Of memory. Of dignity. Of truth. I remember the day we came to clean it. Just the two of us. She wore overalls and a head wrap, her hair already thinning from treatment, but she still danced barefoot through the empty living room like it was the grand ballroom at Versailles. She never once called it a backup or a plan B. She called it hers. But she always meant me. "I'm not building this because I think things will fall apart," she said, handing me a brush soaked in white paint, "but because I've seen what people are capable of when they think something's up for grabs." I hadn't understood her meaning then. Mara loved Adam, but she didn't idolize him. She saw the cracks in him. Where I made excuses for thoughtlessness, she kept score of patterns. Where I said, "He's just busy, he's just ambitious," she said, "He's already learning how to smile while taking things you didn't offer." Now, every scene rings crystal clear, the way Adam eyed the family driveway like it was wasted space. The way he sighed. When Mara asked him to join Sunday dinners during her treatments, the time he told her, joking but not joking, that inheritance was just a transfer of assets from the emotionally burdened to the emotionally stable. She didn't laugh. And that night, alone in the kitchen after he left, she said, "If he ever talks to you like that after I'm gone, don't let it be the first time you noticed." She knew. Earlier this afternoon, I opened the last drawer of Mara's old dresser, the one we moved here together, the one with the chipped handle and her perfume still barely clinging to the lining paper. Inside, folded between pages of an old gardening journal, was a second letter. It simply read, "When he starts calling you forgetful, open this. I'd forgotten it existed. But here I am. Aletta, by now I imagine Adam's done something disappointing. I won't guess what. He's creative when ambition twists sharp. You'll want to defend him first. You always do. You're kind like that. But that same kindness is why you needed this house. It's why I did what I did. This wasn't to make a statement. It was to make sure someone in this family still knew how to hold something without trying to own it. This home is yours. Not because you earned it, but because I saw you honor things without needing to parade them. That was always your magic. Quiet dignity. That's how I knew it would survive in your hands. Let go when you're ready. But not before. And remember, surviving isn't bitterness. It's clarity. All my love. Still yours, Mara." When I finished reading, I didn't sob. I didn't even sniffle. I just stared ahead and felt seen. That's what grief becomes in time. Not screaming, not breaking, but understanding. A letting in, a letting be. In this porch chair surrounded by trees, I feel no need for final words, no closure speech. I don't need Adam's apology or the family's validation or to get even. I have her letter, I have our house, and I have peace. That's all she ever wanted from me. He showed up uninvited. I heard the car before I saw it. Too clean, too expensive for this quiet stretch of road. Tires crunching gravel like they didn't belong here. I stayed seated on the porch, still in my flannel and house shoes, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. I didn't stand up, didn't call out, just waited. Adam climbed out, looking around like he wasn't sure if he'd reached the right place. His eyes scanned the trees, the modest frame of the house, the old bronze mailbox leaning slightly to the left. "This is it?" he asked, stepping closer. "You've been staying here?" I didn't answer right away. Let the silence stretch long enough to let the question fall apart in the air. "Yes," I said finally. "I have." He looked stunned. Not by the size of the place, but by the fact that he had never known it existed. "She bought this behind my back." "Behind your back." That choice of words. "No," I replied. "She bought it before you had the chance to show her your back." He lowered his gaze, then stepped up onto the porch. For a second, he looked like a kid again. Lost, small, uncertain. I almost forgot how calculated he's become. Almost. "I didn't come here to fight," he said, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I came because maybe I pushed too hard. I thought I was helping. I thought—" "No, you didn't," I said flatly, setting my mug down. "You thought I'd give in." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I miss her," he said, voice tighter now. "So do I." "No, I mean, this has all been harder than I thought. I didn't know what to do after she was gone. Everything I thought I controlled started slipping, and I guess I handled it wrong. There it was. Not quite an apology, not quite remorse. More of a flinch. I leaned back in the chair. That's grief. It breaks things. But how you treat people underneath your grief, that's character." He looked away. "I'm not a villain. Dad?" "No, but you were willing to treat me like I was dying just to get your hands on property you didn't lift a finger to build." He winced, but said nothing. "You tried to make me feel like I was losing my mind. Amber called Aunt Elise to check in. Remember that? You spun a narrative to the family, hoping I'd be too ashamed or confused to see it happening in real time. I didn't mean, you meant it enough." The pause between us frayed at something inside him. I could see his shoulders slack. The performative energy was draining. What remained beneath it looked real, or at least closer to it. "I don't know how to fix all of it," he said, quieter now. "I know you probably hate me. I don't hate you, I said softly. And I never will. But I won't carry the weight of your choices for you. He stared at the floorboards. Maybe we could just talk sometime, just about Mom, or anything, I considered it. Truly did. Then I nodded once. Maybe. But only if you stop trying to manage me and start working on yourself. He looked up, confused. What do you mean? I mean therapy, counseling. Grief isn't your enemy, Adam, but whatever you're running from, it is. That landed. He didn't argue. Didn't agree either, just nodded slightly, like some part of him, buried beneath years of ego and performance, knew I wasn't wrong. Okay, he whispered. Then he turned and walked slowly down the porch steps. I watched him go, not as a son I wanted to protect, but as a man I hoped would one day protect someone else better than he had me. Role reversal isn't always loud. Sometimes, the parent becomes the only adult in the room, long after the children think they've grown. The street outside is quiet, except for the laughter of children riding bikes down the uneven pavement. The oldest one, maybe 10, pulls the others in a plastic wagon like he's leading an expedition. I don't know their names, but I've started learning their routines. Around 4 o'clock, they race down the lane like it owes them something. Around 5, their parents call them back for dinner with voices that bounce softly through the trees. It's become my favorite time of day. There's nothing left that needs fixing in me. Haven't rebuilt the family, haven't hosted dinners, or reconciled with the ones who stepped back when they thought I was slipping. But somehow I'm whole, in the quiet, in the still space Mara created with foresight and love. In the corners of this simple house where nobody's trying to measure square footage for resale potential. Most people think victory has to be loud, that you plant your flag, make a speech, let the world know they were wrong about you. But I've come to believe the truest kind of vindication requires no witnesses. Because what mattered wasn't proving anyone wrong. It was proving me right. Right to trust Mara's instincts. Right to hold firm when Adam pressed in with plastic concern and paper-thin patience. Right to choose dignity over drama. Right to let go without needing to explain why. Adam hasn't visited since that day on the porch. He didn't message. Didn't drop by. No dramatic follow-up or empty apologies. Just silence. And honestly, it's the kindest thing he's offered in months. I don't think he knows what to say now that his version of the story collapsed. And I don't need him to explain it. That part of the chapter is closed. And I didn't have to slam the door. Most people imagine a revenge arc ending with applause. What they don't see are the quiet endings, the ones where peace doesn't require a performance. Where there's no courtroom monologue, no dramatic final breakdown. Just a man, sitting on a porch, holding a coffee that's still warm, finally breathing evenly again. I think about Mara a lot. Not with that early sharpness of grief that cuts without warning, but with a kind of warmth that radiates slowly, like sun on stone. Every time the wind moves through the pines, I hear her. Every time I leave the porch light on before bed, I feel her. She didn't just outthink everyone. She loved better than they knew how to receive. And somehow, through all of it, through the manipulation and silence and the ache of watching my own son choose power over people, she gave me the one thing they couldn't fabricate with titles or paperwork: peace without permission. Across the street, the children start to drift home. The wagon boy waves before disappearing behind a hedge. I smile to myself, not because anything dramatic happened, but because nothing needs to. This quiet clarity, this life without apology is the win. Sometimes, you don't need to be right in the eyes of others. You just need to be free. And now I am.